Morning, I'm Lacey McKeever, and I'll be your host this morning for our virtual access event on June 20th, 2024. As usual, we are holding this event in webinar format, which means we cannot see or hear you, but hopefully you can see and hear us clearly. We encourage you to submit your questions and comments in the chat and Q&A boxes, as we will be monitoring those throughout the event. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Felix Bunnell.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for one of these great virtual access programs. We've had a lot of great conversation this past season and in previous seasons. I want to invite Jared Axelrod to join us, sponsor today's program with Amazon.
Thanks, Felix. Good morning, everybody. Great to have everyone joining us today for our third in a series of DSA's virtual access. This is the third in our spring series. We're getting in just under the wire here. I think the summer solstice is at 1:50 p.m. Pacific time. So this is the last hours of spring, and so very pleased to be joining you all for this final series in this access. DSA Access series. This morning's topic is on Third Avenue, and is one that I know comes up whenever we discuss downtown Seattle, as it fits within both categories of significant challenges as well as significant opportunities. For far too long, this transit corridor has fallen well short of its potential, and that comes into view for thousands of people who embark and disembark there daily, whether they're taking transit or visiting, coming to and from downtown Seattle. But there is momentum for transforming Third Avenue. Private and public sector leaders helped produce DSA's Third Avenue Vision Report right before the pandemic, and Urban Land Institute Northwest published a playbook for near-term action earlier this year. We're seeing private investment along the corridor as well that would have seemed unthinkable just 15 years ago. The modern, a high-rise apartment along Third Avenue is as well as the under-construction First Light condo high-rise right across the street. Just two examples in one section of Third Avenue, bringing more people to this critical north-south spine downtown. We see examples of transit and public realm enhancement in downtowns across the country, including the 16th Street Mall in Denver, which we're going to hear more about today. By 2026, when we are all looking forward to welcoming people from around the world for the World Cup, they should experience a different Third Avenue than what we see today. And I think we're all very excited about the opportunities for that. So again, very excited to have Amazon sponsor this DSA Access series. Excited for today's conversation. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Felix to get us going.
All right. Thanks, Jared Axelrod, Senior Manager of Public Policy for Amazon, sponsor of today's program. Thanks for joining us today. This is the latest installment in Virtual Access. My name is Felix Bunnell, and today we are looking at the present and future of Third Avenue in downtown Seattle. We're not going to be talking about the history, which we could spend hours about that. I do occasionally get sentimental about Third Avenue. I first worked in Seattle about 40 years ago, and I remember never saw a movie there, but the old Embassy Theater on Third Avenue with its marquee and the little metal pennant sign that said open all night in neon letters, or the Nielsen pastry shop where you could get the famous Snitter, which moved up to Lower Queen Anne. There was the Ross, where Ross Dress for Less was the old Woolworths, or my personal favorite, Bruno's Mexican-Italian Pizzeria there on Third Avenue. But enough of my waxing nostalgic, though I think what I'm fondly recalling could be categorized as retail and possibly even activation and placemaking. Now, let's introduce our panelists. We have Deputy Mayor of Seattle, Tim Burgess. He's responsible for key priorities in Mayor Bruce Harrell's agenda, including public safety and economic development. Mr. Burgess previously served 10 years at City Hall as a Seattle City Council member and as the city's 55th mayor. I remember pestering you at a press conference at Memorial Stadium asking you about naming rights, and you got kind of mad at me asking about that. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. Chris Auclair is the Director of Mobility for King County Metro, and in this role, she oversees planning for all the agency's public transportation services, including customer experience and delivery of contracted services. Auclair served on the Strategic Forum panel that informed the Northwest Urban Lands Institute's Third Avenue report, which we'll hear a lot more about today. Andrew Iltis serves as Vice President of Planning and Community Impact for the Downtown Denver Partnership. His portfolio includes work on Denver's 16th Street Mall renovation. Prior to joining Downtown Denver Partnership, Mr. Iltis spent 8 years in transportation and community planning. Now, we do have some questions we prepared in advance, and we'll get to audience questions as often as we can throughout the program. As Lacey mentioned, use the chat function, the Q&A function. We monitor those. We try to weave them into the arc of the conversation. So don't be shy about asking questions there. And traditionally with this program, we always begin with a couple of data points before we get into the actual conversation. So let's see here. King County Metro reports that 300,003 people rode Metro buses on May 15th, 2024. That figure represents the highest one-day total in 4 years. DSA's Third Avenue Vision Report, which was published in 2019, which seems like a million years ago, noted that Third Avenue carried 290 buses per hour during peak periods. That's more than any other transit corridor in the United States or Canada. For comparison, New York City's Fifth Avenue carries just 150 buses per hour during peak periods. And now that Urban Land Institute, which you'll hear abbreviated as ULI a lot today, their Third Avenue Strategic Forum report, which was published earlier this year, identifies 4 nodes along Third Avenue that they think should be the city's area of focus for short-term action. The nodes are, this is going from north to south, between Pine and Pike, between University and Seneca, between James and Yesler and Pioneer Square, and that's slightly longer than a block. It's where Yesler comes down diagonally. It's around Courthouse and City Hall Park. And the 4th node is 3rd and Jackson, which is where the 2nd Avenue extension cuts across to 4th Avenue. So it's not exactly a regular block there. Okay, the 16th Street Mall project in Denver. Again, we're gonna invoke that a lot today. We can possibly take lessons from that project, and we'll hear more about that in just a moment. Total budget of that project is $172.5 million, and that's been raised through a combination of local, state, and federal funds, and completion is scheduled for next year. And then finally, almost halfway through the season, the Seattle Mariners stand atop the American League West with a record of 44-32. They're 9 games ahead of the second place Houston Astros. As always, for superstition's sake, that's all we'll say about that topic. Okay, now we are going to cover a lot of ground today, and we do count on your questions. And I do want to come back at least a few times to how people can get involved if they want to support this effort, if they want to somehow put their support behind these different initiatives and different projects or different aspects we're talking about Third Avenue, whether they're business owners or landowners or just people who work or live downtown. Okay, so the first thing we want to talk about is this project in Denver. It's the age of it is similar to the most recent change to Third Avenue, which is that transit tunnel back in the 80s and early 90s. But it's called the 16th Street Mall project. And Andrew Iltis, you have some slides you've wanted to share with us and kind of give us the background and kind of put it in context for things that we might be able to, lessons we might be able to learn, things that apply to Seattle, and even things that might not apply, but just kind of make this as actionable as you can in terms of how we can learn from what you guys have been working on for the last several years in Denver.
You got it. Yeah, and thanks so much for having me this morning. I'm really excited in particular because I love sharing of information between cities. Most of the time we're going out to other cities and kind of trying to find lessons to learn from. And what I've found in most cases, it's not best practices anymore. They aren't best practice programs. It's really just how is this city operating and solving this particular problem. And you can glean a lot more about what the process is than what the thing is, I think, in so many ways. So today, hopefully, I think in many ways, the story about 16th is similar to kind of in the place that you're at on Third Avenue, but you'll see the context is very different. I think, recognizing the particulars about Third and the functions that you want it to serve and the people that you want it to serve, I think that's the most important thing. But how we got to where we are at 16th is important. So here's 16th back in the 60s, 3-lane, car sewer, car direction. This had been converted from the day, and this was kind of the height of commercial opportunity in 16th on 16th in the 1950s. I'll give you a little context here in the next slide. So about a mile and a half long are the 16th Street corridor. Once that slide transfers over, there you go. Once that corridor really, is the center spine of our downtown. It really is one of the longest streets that goes through our commercial core. And it has kind of a similar length. It connects our Union Station to Civic Center Station, which is up at up at the kind of the southeast end as you're kind of looking at this map. And that purple boundary is kind of what the Downtown Denver Partnership oversees. And that's kind of important too as we get into the context of how to manage these types of projects. Our bid boundary, just so I pointed out for you here, is a smaller square that's really focused right around 120 blocks, focused right around that orange line, the 16th Street Mall corridor. You can go to the next slide. So in the 1960s, the Downtown Denver Partnership actually recognized this corridor as having a lot of opportunity to upgrade and to enhance the activity happening on the street. We had a lot of big department stores that were closing their doors. The use of downtown as a neighborhood district was really changing into a full-time commercial district. And those real department stores were finding better places out in the suburbs, and people were shopping for it there. So the Downtown Denver Partnership said, gosh, we really need a main street in downtown Denver. What can we do to bring more of that placemaking feature to downtown and serve this new commuter, high occupant commuter need of these commercial buildings that were soon to come with the advent of urban renewal and all of that in the 1960s. You can go to the next slide. So commissioned, the first report was commissioned in 1974. C.F. Murphy did a study, and then later RTD hired I.M. Pei and Olin and Associates to come up with this vision for a transit mall that would really effectively move people in a free transit shuttle system, a circulator, if you will, between large transit nodes. Where there was a bus station on Market Station, and then a bus station at Civic Center Station. And it would move people up and down this mile-long corridor, and then also create this sort of placemaking feature with a large median in the middle that would be tree-lined with these locusts, honey locusts providing dappled light, and these historic lights, and this beautiful granite paver system. And those things are really important. I'll talk about those a little bit more in a second. Go to the next slide. So 1982, project was constructed. Amazing. We were in our heyday of oil boom in downtown, and you can just feel the energy, right? This is the classic quintessential 1980s downtown being great. And you can go to the next slide. Even it's really served us well, even through the 1990s, as we started to invest more in baseball stadiums and other things, to really create that experience as downtown. We were serving 40,000 people on the mall. We had 145,000 workers. Of course, this is all pre-COVID conditions, 27,000 residents. You can go to the next slide. So some of the things that we started to notice was that the mall shuttle was doing a really good job of getting people to move up and down the long corridor, but it wasn't doing a very good job of creating that stickiness. People would come down, bring their families down to the mall on a weekend, and they really just kind of cruise. And we did all sorts of things as the partnership and as the city to try to create that activation. We had vending kiosks in the middle median. And that middle median really was starting to serve as a little bit of a nuisance for us because people didn't like to cross over even just the transit shuttle way to get to that center median. Go to the next slide. We did, so before this design was created, we did commission a couple of studies within the partnership and through, just like similar downtown association, or downtown Seattle association, we also bring activations to the street. And we commissioned a couple studies, one by Gell and Jacobs and Olin, to take a look at the design and what would happen if we could take that space in that median and bring it to the outside. I will say this design and a lot of the construction purpose and need was also driven by what was happening underneath the ground and subsurface. We were having terrible drainage issues that throughout the winter in our freeze thaw, we're popping the granite pavers up, creating a lot of maintenance issues, trip fall hazards, it was a huge maintenance nightmare that really persisted for 20 or so years, and really was the driving force behind the funding for this project. But in the meantime, we said, gosh, we could really do something to the public realm. So you can see kind of what the end result of this design was here, to bring those buses together. So they're So that median space is actually effectively turned back out to the outside as amenity that can be serving adjacent retail. It can be serving some more of that stickiness, maybe some play features. And you'll see what we did with that space here in the next slide. So the project, the 60th Street Mall project, originally.
Oh, we're frozen up. Andrew?
50 million,
There you
as
go.
Felix mentioned, it's up. Got me back? Okay.
Yep.
PCL, Martin & Martin, Dig Studios, really brought this vision to life. And we can go to the next slide. I'm almost done here because I got to show you the new photos. So I mentioned the subsurface utility work. A lot of what we noticed were the trees were, Denver is a very arid climate, unlike the Northwest. And we need to do a lot more with our tree infrastructure to support a healthy root system. So a lot of the infrastructure work that we've done has actually been to create this structured cell system to support the healthy root growth. So that's what this one demonstrates. But then you can go to the next slide. So much of what we've been focusing on, and especially the group of our team, is going to really focusing on what are those placemaking elements to create that stickiness, to create those reasons. I would love, Felix, you mentioning the reasons why you remember third, and this is kind of what we're hoping to create. These gigantic cutthroat trout, Colorado's state fish, what will it be like for a little kid to sit there on those trout? They'll remember those experiences coming down to the street. Next slide. And so today we have the first block. So this is, again, a 12 block project. We are working, through block by block on the construction. And this actually is one of the first blocks to open. It'll be officially technically open next week on the 26th. And we've moved FF&E out there. And we've started to bring some of those amenities, those public realm amenities that we have been sort of looking for decades to the street by allowing those patios to expand into that amenity space. You can go to the next slide. Bringing some more FF&E, fixtures, furniture for people to be in lounge chairs, adding some play for families, create more of that family environment and more of that stickiness in the public realm. So you can stop the slideshow now. I would just summarize by saying, I think what's made this possible is in the 1970s, the Downtown Denver Partnership really stepping up to say, hey, we have an issue here, and then aligning the coordinating agencies, RTD, our regional transit district, the city, and the businesses really to get behind this vision for 16th. And what that led to then was our ability to create a maintenance district. And unlike Third, where you already have a bid, we started our maintenance district really just focused on 16th and a block off on either side in the 1970s. And then in the 1980s, it was expanded to be the larger bid, much like the Metro District. So that's one little difference, I think, that's interesting and maybe something that you kind of alluded to as the PSA looks forward. So that's my summary. Yeah. What do you got?
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Thanks, Andrew. I mean, and you state the problem very clearly. It's sort of a maintenance inspired you guys to have to address the underlying infrastructure beneath the surface, and that's kind of led to all these other, challenges and opportunities. Chris, maybe we start with you. Third Avenue, what we're talking about, it's a 1.7 mile long stretch between Battery and Yesler. Maybe just sort of set the common vocabulary here. You're part of that Urban Land Institute strategic group that got together and put that report out. Can you give me kind of a concise sort of give me like the challenge statement for what needs to be addressed at Third Avenue, so we all have a common understanding of what we're talking about when we say, challenges that are faced by the current status of Third Avenue?
Of course. Thanks so much. And thanks for inviting us here today. I think this is really a sign that we are moving forward together and really looking at how we can make a place in downtown Seattle that attracts people, all people to downtown. So as you said, the ULI forum that came together was a group of 10 leaders, and it was initiated by the City of Seattle, thanks to our partners, and the Downtown Seattle Association. And I think one of the biggest things that we were able to do is set context of where we are today. not talk about where we were pre-pandemic, but where are we today? And we all recognized that it really was kind of an icon of what's going wrong in downtown Seattle. And that in order for us to move forward, we can't just be coordinating anymore. We actually have to look at full alignment of how we come together. And I heard Andrew talk a little bit about this and what we can do together to pull our resources together so that we can be working together to change the corridor in terms of making it more safe, but also making it more attractive, making it so that it operates better, making it so that people understand where and what they want to do around this downtown Seattle. A couple key findings that I just want to highlight is that we all acknowledged that today it is the multimodal corridor throughout all of the region. And you talked about that, Felix. There are 4 major light rail stations that connect people throughout the region. And as you all know, light rail is expanding, and getting people in and out of the region requires you right now to go through the downtown core. And as you come up, you have the largest transit spine in the region, where we have the majority of our buses, 5 of our rapid ride, our most frequent services, our trolley zero emission services also operating on that. And we're able to connect people to 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And this corridor needs to operate better. So in this forum, I'm just going to say there are 2 major things that we're working on. One is the short-term, near-term investments. No longer are we going to be doing it separately, but we're actually coordinating it all through the city of Seattle. King County Metro is bringing millions of dollars in the near term in order to help deliver something better for our customers on 3rd Avenue. And we're not going to do it alone. We're going to do it in partnership with the public and the private entities. And the other thing that we found out, the second major element is what Andrew talked about, is that the governing body of 3rd Avenue has to change. If we're really to look about how we're to attract people and to make 3rd Avenue work, we have to be able to understand that resources are being funneled, decision-making is being funneled into one entity. And so that's what we begin to allude to in the ULI forum is what can we do together, and maybe developing a public development authority, maybe something different than we even know today, but we need to do it better together and really look at that alignment.
And you used compared or contrasted 2 words, alignment and coordination. And I don't want to get into pedantics or, like split hairs about that, but tell me more about that. Explain what you mean about the difference between alignment and coordination.
I just want to state, as a public sector professional, we coordinate with our partners all the time. We're sharing information, whether it's on media releases or how we're digging up roadways. We are constantly coordinating. But when we talk about alignment, it's really what are we measuring in terms of joint outcomes, in terms of what we call success, and how are we funneling our resources maybe into one entity rather than separate entities, separate contractors? How are we looking together so that we don't put in a bus stop sign and then tear up the roadway right next to it? Rather, how am I paying the city of Seattle to put in my bus stop sign, work with each other so that they can leverage that larger resource and help make decisions? Alignment is different than coordination, but it takes a lot of work together and a real partnership.
That sounds like that would be useful in many aspects of public agency interaction. Everything, not to be flip about that, but that kind of alignment sounds like something that we've sought around all sorts of different, sometimes intractable issues in Seattle and King County for the last, I don't know, since World War II, probably.
But you can see many examples of how we've done that, whether it's opening of these light rail stations, on how we're coordinating around what those stations and stop. That's better alignment. You can also see it in what we did in the downtown waterfront. I mean, that was alignment between the state, the city, and the county. So there are examples. We are and need to do better for 3rd Avenue. I will acknowledge that.
And we're getting a lot of questions in the chat function about public safety, and we'll definitely address public safety. But one kind of sort of deeper philosophical question. Is it asking, and this could be for all 3 of you guys, are we asking too much for the amount of transit traffic that 3rd Avenue is serving and the role that corridor is playing, simply moving people through and to their destinations? Is it asking too much for it to also be a destination or a place that has activation and placemaking? I mean, is that cynical, or is it pie in the sky to ask so much of a corridor like this to do all those other positive things?
I'll jump in here. I don't think it is, because 3rd Avenue must work better than it's working today. We don't really have that option. We can't just say, well, we're going to focus on 2nd or 1st or 5th. All of the north-south corridors in the downtown, because of how our city is shaped, have to work. And by working, that means they have to be safe, they have to be perceived to be safe, and they have to be attractive for retail and residential investments. One of the things that the city has done through the mayor's downtown activation plan is we upzoned parts of Third Avenue, primarily from Union to Virginia Street, to allow for much higher residential high rises. We did that a little bit in Belltown as well. We're getting ready in cooperation and the phrase I use, strategic integration with King County, to do the same thing in the South Downtown, around the county properties near the courthouse, the jail, and a little bit further south. But there's also many blocks there owned by private parties that, we need to position these areas as being attractive for more residential development, because one of the key elements of downtown success is getting more people downtown, living downtown, working downtown, visiting downtown. So, Felix, we have to fix Third Avenue. It's not an option.
Yeah, and some of those changes in upzoning, I mean, those take a while to affect. I mean, that's a long-term approach. I know we're just about a little less than 2 years away from the World Cup being here in Seattle in 2026. I know that's mentioned. Sounders mentioned that as like the transit capacity of Seattle was a big part of the planning for attracting the World Cup to be here. So I know this is in the Urban Land Institute report, this notion of short term versus long term, and short term I think is defined as 2 years. What are we looking at for the next 2 years in terms of what's going to change about Third Avenue? What will people see? How will they know that change is taking place?
Felix, let me just also state that I think what you're getting at here is the reason the World Cup was chosen, and Seattle was one of the major cities, is to recognize that mobility in the region is critical, and public transit is an important part. I want to just really thank Sound Transit is growing. We just opened the East Link starter line. We're going to go to Linwood Link. King County Metro is bringing 135,000 hours this fall to bus service. Our customers are asking for more weekend and weekday service. And then we're also opening the G line in partnership with the city of Seattle. And that G line is going to take you from Madison Valley to downtown Seattle. It's going to be a new rapid ride line that actually has doors on both sides. So things like this, we are investing in public infrastructure, and particularly in public transit. We also know that a vibrant city, and why we were chosen, vibrant transit system. And I think that's really, really important. As Deputy Mayor, you were talking about, we can't build ourselves out of this with more cars and lanes. We have to invest in public transit, because that's how we get people. That's how we get people that are serving, that are helping to clean our hotels, that are just commuting, that are tourists, etc. And so the near term that you're getting at, Felix, is that we have to invest in Third Avenue, because now the solution is making it better than it is today. So what does that look like? I think first off, the customer experience should be more unified. We're looking at opportunities so you have better wayfinding, so you can figure out where your stops and stations are. We're working with Sound Transit and others that as you come up from a light rail station, you can quickly see where you want to go, whether you want to go to Pike Place Market or to Westlake or even to Capitol Hill. How are you going to connect to those services, and what does that look like? In that, we need the private sector to come along with us. And one of the biggest things we found in the ULI thing is the vacant storefronts. And it's really hard. It's a chicken or egg, right? How can I bring a tenant into this area if the presence of safety, if the perception is not what they want? And so how do we come together and maybe look at new ways? I know we're talking with the city about how maybe we build maybe an Orca station for our Orca smart card system and get a place in which people could learn more about public transit. Maybe we bring in some sort of city parks and invigorating in that. There's a lot of discussion about lighting and how we not just put lighting in for just seeing, but also for art and understanding what it's looking like. I will tell you right now, we are all talking about bringing major investment in the near term. The question will be is how quickly we can work together to make sure that we deliver in the short term.
Yeah, and let's talk about one of the things that the deputy mayor mentioned. Is talked about sort of this public safety and perception, because that comes up often in these virtual access panels. This notion of, the statistics are one thing, people's feelings maybe outside this, maybe in the suburbs outside the city limits are another. Because if you're actually in downtown Seattle, the experience is not exactly the way it gets portrayed typically, sometimes in the media. So most of the questions, many of the questions so far in the Q&A relate to this safety and as it relates to storefronts that are vacant. What's the city doing in terms of public safety and perception of public safety, and what's possible on those categories for Third Avenue, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, thanks. I'm on Third Avenue every day. I take the bus to and from work, and my bus runs on Third Avenue, and I see what's happening there. And frankly, it's very discouraging. I saw it just this morning. My bus came through about 6:40 or so. And, I saw dozens of people using fentanyl or selling and buying. Some people passed out on the street, et cetera. So we recognize that's a major problem. And Mayor Harrell has been very clear that his approach to public safety is both enforcement and providing the health services that people need. We can't force them to take those services. And you will see soon much more assertive police action downtown. Our new police chief, Sue Rahr, has developed a plan that will be implemented very soon. We've got some struggles in terms of the number of police officers we have and the restrictions on booking at the King County Jail, which we are actively discussing with King County. So we're not afraid to arrest people, and you'll see that pick up here significantly, especially if individuals engage in crimes of violence and pick up guns, et cetera. The statistics in the downtown area are good. Crime is down, violent crime down about 6% so far this year through the end of May. Property crime down almost 30%. But as you mentioned, Felix, those statistics, while they're important and we certainly look at them, it's perception and people's feelings that are much more important in this situation. So we've increased street cleaning. We've added millions of dollars to the Downtown Metropolitan Improvement District for their efforts. We installed special lighting on Third Avenue. We need to do a lot more in that regard. And the ULI plan calls for that, including on the art expression side, which is very important. So we realize we have problems. And if we're going to be ready for World Cup, we need to start right now. Because you don't change street norms of behavior overnight. It takes time.
And one of the questions in the chat box is, why not install public cameras?
Those are coming. The city council will vote their final action on CCTV cameras in late July. We will, if approved, and we're pretty confident they will be installed from Yesler north to Broad Street on 3rd. And in the commercial core, they'll even go east and west on some of the east-west streets. Those cameras will be monitored by the police real-time crime center. That's a very deliberate step to change norms of behavior on the street.
Let's see some other questions from the box.
Can I just jump in
on
that?
Oh yeah, please
Felix,
do. Yeah,
real quick?
definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
I was just thinking, I was listening to one, I love this differentiation between coordination and alignment, because we really went through this a lot at the right after the pandemic. We started a really coordinated effort all the way from the district attorney's office to our street ambassadors, very similar to what DSA has in terms of an ambassador program. Non-enforcement individuals out there maybe providing connection services to people that are unhoused, maybe a quicker way to report on property damage, or even report on individuals that are suspected of being malicious or committing crime. So I think that coordination piece, it's okay to start with a really strong coordination, even if you aren't totally aligned on why Third Avenue is important for everyone just yet. I think your point, and what I'm hearing from the deputy mayor, is like, it's right now you kind of need to get your hands on just that perception that people think that it's sort of lost, right? And that there aren't enough eyes on it to really matter. Well, it does matter, and I think you're showing why. And I think then, though, you have to be really quick to come in and bring some people, because I think that was something that our consultants really pushed us hard on, was what are those placemaking features that resonate with the context. And I read this in the ULI report, and I thought it was really interesting how similar it was to the outcomes on 16th, that those nodes of activity and what those nodes mean to the ribs, not just along the spine, but how those are connecting off. If people are going to the Pikes Market and they're going to cross Third, you don't want them to see the whole scene of Third right there at that node. They want to feel like they've arrived at a place where they can make that quick transit connection and go off to the next thing. So I think, and we had the exact same thing with 16th. We recognized that we have these nodes. One of the photos that I showed there was from our node that has more intense FF&E, more intense activation. We know we weren't going to do that along a mile-long corridor, but if we can do that in a couple of places and really make sure that that feels good, we'll change perception and start to create a little bit of that center, of that new center for being safe, feeling comfortable, and having fun.
Are there perception issues in Denver around 16th Street?
Definitely. And especially, there was some time in the 90s, there were a couple of bad actors that were called out. We had someone who was wielding a PVC pipe. And, that became a notorious thing that happened on 16th, this guy swinging a pipe around. And, even though it was one person, all of a sudden 16th was the center of activity, of that kind of activity for everyone in people's eyes. And even in
We're losing you a little bit.
days, I think with the it's really challenging to sort of maintain. Shoot.
Yeah,
How
you're
about
back.
now? Getting people to be excited about the new vision for 16th as we kind of trundle through construction has been just as challenging, I think, than changing perception of downtown as a whole. We're dealing with that also, right? In the meantime, we have this big perception of downtown. There was a news article that called downtown a lawless hellhole, and how do we come back from those types of things? And we've decided it's really about creating good experiences. We, like the Mariners, we also have a couple of championship teams that are helping to bring more people down for the first time to go, oh, this is actually really cool. This, 16th actually doesn't feel so bad. I think that's really important, creating those moments.
Yeah, and that's
same story here in Seattle. Same story. There are dozens and dozens of positive, good, wholesome things happening downtown every day. The media doesn't cover those because the media is driven by conflict. But it's a beautiful place, and our new Central Waterfront Park, amazing, absolutely amazing. We're in a good place.
You have a transit line that's pumping. We had to take the buses off of 16th, so people aren't even able to see the mall from the transit anymore. I think that's maybe a benefit that you have that we don't have, is you have a ton of people that are going and they're seeing, this terrible window view of this scene. Well, maybe take advantage of that. That seems to be, there's something interesting there.
Yeah.
It will be interesting to see how Metro solves the number and frequency of buses on Third. It's overwhelming, and they tend to leapfrog each other going in both directions. So we're eager to see, Chris, what you come up with for how you solve all of that.
And there's a great question from one of the audience members. Forgive me, but as many buildings have built fronts to avoid the pollution caused by all the buses on 3rd Avenue, and the city is dedicated to lowering car volume in the downtown core, wouldn't it make more sense to diversify the transportation corridor to include 2nd and 4th? This question comes up in different forms in the media through opinionated people, this notion of do we take buses off 3rd Avenue, or do we really stay committed to 3rd Avenue in its current role? What do you say, Chris?
That's a great question. First off, I just want to state that we are moving to zero emissions buses, and most of the buses that are arriving we're all hybrid. And then we're also have our electric trolley that is zero emissions, that overhead trolley wire. We are moving to all zero emissions by 2035. So that means that we are really changing our fleet. But I just want to recognize, as Mayor Burgess, you said, Deputy Mayor Burgess, and others I know feel that a big bus rolling down 3rd Avenue might not be the perception of what you want in terms of how people move. It is really critical for everyone to understand the volumes that we're talking about here versus what Andrew's talking about is much greater. It's one of the largest transit corridors in the country. And what you're doing here is connecting between light rail and bus to the entire region. And in that, we know and we hear from our customers that having a two-way transit system is actually easier to read and understand. It's a really flat corridor. So those that have low mobility options, it's easier for them to move. And then if you take a bus on Second and finding it down on Fourth is very challenging. And that's something that we hear from our customers. It's also more efficient for our operations. So if we look at safety and security of Metro Transit Police, if we look at our service quality folks, keeping them on one quarter saves resources. But I do want to state in the long term, I don't think as many buses will be needed coming through downtown as we look at light rail going to West Seattle and Ballard. We will have another transit tunnel that goes through downtown. And we will need to look and understand what the 3rd Avenue DSA report is telling us is how do we operate it differently? How do we work together? We can't wait that long, guys. We have to think now. Why do our buses skip stop? Why do they go around? Well, I think it's really important is keeping them fast and reliable and not having them stuck behind a broken bus or stuck behind someone that is loading someone with a wheelchair actually keeps our region moving. It keeps people connected to the jobs and opportunities. So with the volumes of buses that we have right now, it does make sense to make sure that we have 2 lanes going in each direction. We are very open to a solution that is different in the future. And we really want to work together to figure out, especially as light rail expands. And I think that's something that we're going to have to really think through. And I love Andrew's example of how you bring the private and the public sector together in a new governing authority and what that might look like.
And that new, I mean, let's talk about that new governing authority, because I want to ask a question about the retail shops and the storefronts now that seem like a really, in terms of a short-term ability to affect change pretty quickly. Those existing storefronts along 3rd Avenue seem like a great place to start. But they talk about the governing authority. Can you be more specific about that? I mean, what are you talking about? Or what are we talking about here for Seattle?
When we talked about in the ULA forum, I think it's just really important that we were looking at the possibility of a business authority, maybe a public development authority. We don't know yet. And the example of the waterfront or the Seattle Center and what the city of Seattle has done to really kind of understand how they can collectively work with the private and public sector, I think are models, but it's going to take us working with our elected officials and our community to understand what are the resources and how we work together. Deputy Mayor Burgess, I don't know if you have more on that to expand on.
I don't. There's lots of ideas, but there's no decisions that have been made yet.
Because that.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, in terms of the various blocks along the 3rd Avenue corridor, the blocks where there are storefronts and ground floor activities tend to have far, far fewer problems. The blocks like around 3rd and Pike, where there are a lot of vacant storefronts, that's where folks congregate who aren't necessarily contributing to the common good there. So you take a look at City Hall Park, which was a mess for several years and closed. Ever since we opened that almost a year ago now, it's beautiful and it's been maintained well. So we can do this if there is a will to do it and to make sure that we're being consistent in on the enforcement side, on the cleaning side, on the lighting side, and making sure that it's attractive to folks to want to be there, which is important.
And now you mentioned the waterfront project, and I think that's one of my favorite things going on in the city right now that will benefit people who live here for centuries to come. I mean, that's a major investment, and it will pay off far, far beyond the time any of us are still alive. And I think that's great. That's what good cities do. They invest not just for the present or the immediate generation, but for, the next century. And that's a sexy project. I mean, the viaduct came down. There's all this great real estate. It was reconnecting to the waterfront. Huge coordination of public and private resources, and and fairly well articulated in terms of what the benefit would be, and things have been rolling out, and we sort of see new stuff gets debuts. It seems like it's the same level of investment, multi-generational, century forward looking investment to make 3rd Avenue the kind of thing that we're all talking about here today, I think. How do we get the public, the taxpayer, the business owner, the person in the suburbs who comes into Seattle a few times a year or whatever, how do we get them excited about a transit corridor? I mean, what's it going to take to really capture the imagination? Because we're looking in the questions. There's people care, and we have hundreds of people attending this forum right now who care about the public safety issues, who care about the real estate issues. How do we coordinate this all together in a way that really leads it forward in a brilliant kind of civic leadership kind of way?
I think it's the alignment that we've been talking about and having all the stakeholders be intimately engaged. I'm pretty sure Third Avenue is going to be far less expensive than the viaduct and the tunnel. And the
Well,
waterfront.
yeah, I hope
think
so.
that's pretty clear. And then we've had philanthropists step up and pledge $40-50 million to extend the waterfront park even further to the north through Sculpture Park, Myrtle Edwards, and to Centennial Park. So people are willing to engage. There's no doubt about that. And I think this planning that ULI did and this conversation and others are exactly what we need to be doing.
Yeah, I really just thinking about what we're talking about in Denver right now, and right now the problem, because 16th is underway, we're all sort of like, sitting on our hands a little bit, going, okay, we got to make sure this thing opens up in a really exciting way and that people have attention on it, but it's not, that problem is sort of, we have the solution we're working on, just bringing that to light. But then there's other parts of downtown that are experiencing kind of the similar issues. And I think, Tim, what you were talking about with all the residential conversions and sort of this new idea about what downtown needs to be and how to bring that density down, I think that really resonated with me a lot. And it also, that helped us sort of start to look at some of what those financing tools and what those organizational structures should be, how those make sense best for the geography or the types of challenges that we're looking to address there. So I don't know if you're tracking any of this of what's happening in Denver, but there's a proposal right now from the mayor's office to expand a downtown development authority that was created around Denver Union Station to include other parts of upper downtown that is more of our traditional commercial core that's sort of in need of some of these larger placemaking and even private development, private investment moves. And so, yeah, I think that really, it's that story though, about if we don't, fix this or start to invest a bit more in it, the drag is really on on all the traveling public that comes to and through downtown. It's on the economic development opportunities. It's on the residential tax base. If we don't support commercial property values in downtown, that burden really starts to drag on the rest of the city. And I think, so some of those messages, especially depending on the tool that or organizational structure you go to, might need to really be broad. And it sounds like, with your transit ridership, there's some ties there. You can say, hey, look, a lot of people use this corridor and need it to feel good and to function well.
A couple questions in the chat box, just really short ones for you, Andrew, about Denver. Integration of pedestrians and transit, and then there's no bicycles in the pictures. Well, can you talk about
That's
pedestrians
right.
and bicycles in the corridor?
Yeah, that was part of, that was a tough decision. And it was decided that there wasn't enough space in the corridor to really bring in a high comfort bikeway on that particular corridor. And so those facilities are on either side. We have one-way couplets on either side, 15th and 17th, that have protected bike lanes that really serve that to and through traffic, although we still get the scooter use. And we have some geofencing that is sort of mildly effective to keep some of that use under control. But just by nature of how many people and how many buses that we want to be on the corridor, there was a decision to not have bikes right on the corridor. Of course, we have a ton of bike parking to make it accessible for people on bikes. And then the question of pedestrians, I think the change of the cross section to have that median space be now reallocated to the outside. The hope is that then helps a little bit of that pedestrian circulation stay on the street or on the sides. That said, there was a very intentional design move to go to a curbless street to allow for, if we decide to pause the buses or move them to another corridor at some other time, or to even, on an event day or something like that, then the space can really function as a plaza. And it's kind of interesting, before we have the shuttles kind of reinitiated back to the new design, seeing how the space performs as a plaza is pretty cool. I think for a mile-long corridor, I still believe that transit shuttles are a pretty effective way to move people up and down that corridor. And as we get more people on the corridor, we'll see how that works. I think, but we did make a couple little design tweaks there to allow for a bit more flexibility around that design in the future.
A question for our City Hall representative. We talked about these like pop-up shops and, short-term activation of retail spaces. What about tax incentives to attract businesses back to the mid-zone?
So we looked at that. We wanted to offer basically waivers on the business and occupation tax, which is aimed directly at businesses. And we can't do it under state law. That tax has to be uniformly applied to everyone. And we can't give subsidies or rebates or whatever to some. So we explored it, but couldn't do it. Washington State is very limited in tax increment financing. So where someone builds a residential tower and property taxes are increased, or the difference between what it was and what it is now is then applied to a specific project. We can do that a little bit, but not at the level that would be needed to make a big impact. So we're still exploring how do we fund these things. Because it is a transit corridor, it opens up a lot more federal funding opportunities for us. But that's all still being explored at this point.
Okay. And we have just a couple minutes left. I want to, in a moment, I want to ask you sort of leave maybe like a positive thought, something to look forward to about Third Avenue. But before we do that, I kind of want to ask, are there elephants in the room that we haven't mentioned today that we should talk about? I think funding is one of them. You alluded to that now, because whatever the total budget will be for Third Avenue, I assume it's going to be a combination of public and private dollars. And if private dollars are required, how do we get those private dollars lined up in time to be effectively used? Anybody want to take that one? Chris, any thoughts? Okay, so that's that. And then I guess along the lines of that same elephant in the room question, often at these discussions, people ask how they can get involved now. What can they do? What can an individual or an organization? How do we get involved in this sooner rather than later? That's probably a question for Deputy Mayor as well as Chris. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the elephant for me, at least in my portfolio here in the mayor's office, is if we don't solve the perception of public safety, none of this other stuff is going to work at all. So we know that, and we will work hard on that. In terms of what people can do, make sure you are telling the city council that you want the CCTV camera project approved, that you want to continue funding more aggressive police hiring, and that enforcement sometimes is needed. As I joke a lot, even liberals like to be safe. This is a very liberal city, but our city just elected a new city council last November, and I think public safety drove those decisions primarily. So make sure you support the council and the mayor in these efforts to change downtown.
One more City Hall question for you while I got you. What about small business from the Q&A? What about small business loans from the city?
We have the storefront repair fund that will help when doors or windows are broken. We also have the Invest in Seattle program that puts pop-ups and others into these retail spaces, some of whom have now signed long-term leases. So that program is working as well.
All right. And so let's have final thoughts now. Just give me sort of like the 15, 20-second street level view, literally, something to look forward to about Third Avenue from our local folks. But let's start with our out-of-town guest. Based on what you know about what you've experienced in Denver and what you've learned about Seattle, give us something to look forward to about Third Avenue.
Yeah, I think that moment when you do have an aligned, action plan, I think is really the thing to look forward to here is once you figure out how to prioritize those needs, because you have a lot of them. And I've heard you all kind of talking about a lot of the different needs, but like really, what is the first thing that's going to happen there? Is it around the transit ridership and making those stop improvements? Is it about the retail? Is it about the safety and enforcement? Is it about public realm and entertainment and act? I think you have to dial that in. But once you figure that out and make a little bit of progress on it, it really does. Then there's a flywheel effect there, right? You start to make a little action, and then the next action gets easier, and then the next action gets easier.
Very nice. What about you, Chris?
I just want to thank Deputy Mayor for really addressing the issue associated with safety and the presence of safety. And as the representative of King County Metro, we don't control what's happening off our buses. So working with cities like the city of Seattle to make that environment of bringing people in and out of our environment more safe is where we want to go. And I haven't had a chance to talk about it, but right now, actually on our buses, our incidents are down. They're down about 22% from year 2020. So we know that the perception's there, as the deputy mayor is speaking about, but what we're trying to do is work together with the cities that really control that environment outside of our buses. And so what I'm going to say to all of you is, come ride transit. You're going to a Mariners game, you're going to a Sounders game, get on the service, whether it's Sound Transit, whether it's the water taxi, whether it's the bus, try it out and then let us know. If you see something, we want to hear from you. And we have signs all over our buses, but you can really call us. We have this new care and presence model that's out there. You'll see our new ambassadors that have the blue jackets on. You'll see that we've actually increased our security presence from 60 officers to 160 officers currently on our system. So reach out to your operator, to a security, or call us and let us know if you see an incident. But come ride us, come try it out, and encourage people to try it out, because that will actually improve the environment also. We know that bringing more people back to transit actually also improves your perception of the safety on transit.
Very good.
Thanks
Deputy
so
Mayor,
much.
Deputy Mayor, give you just the last very short word.
Downtown is a beautiful place for all of us, and it's working. Yes, we have some challenges, some problems, we know that, but it's a great place. I'm going to the market this weekend with a bunch of friends. It's going to be a wonderful time. You should all join us.
All right. I want to thank our panelists, Deputy Mayor Tim Burgess, Chris O'Clair of King County Metro, and Andrew Iltis of the Downtown Denver Partnership. Also, thanks to Jared Axelrod and Amazon for their support of this series. And thanks to all our audience members for joining us today for this edition of DSA Virtual Access. And thanks, as always, to the fabulous DSA staff. Next week, Thursday, June 27th, is the DSA mid-annual meeting, and it's already sold out, and there's a waiting list. So get your tickets earlier next year, folks. Until then, I'm Felix Bunnell on behalf of DSA. Thanks again for joining us this morning, and we will see you downtown.